Ambassador Bolton, good to see you again on TV Rain. Thank you for being with us. First of all,
Glad to be with you.
I would like to ask you about the situation in Kursk region of Russia. It is on fire, and the U.S. officials don't comment and insist that they did not know about the plans of Ukrainian armed forces. What do you think about the possible outcome of this operation? What would be your suggestions?
Well, it looks to me like Ukraine took advantage of what they perceived to be a weakness in the Russian defenses, perhaps because there are insufficient troops. They've been deployed elsewhere. And so they made a very daring incursion across the border. So far, they've not met with much opposition. So I think the operation signals a political resolve on the part of the government of Ukraine to continue the war and to bring the war home on Russian territory. But my is that Russian reinforcements are on the way in presumably very strong numbers. So Ukraine has to make a tactical decision whether they've made their point politically and militarily and they should withdraw, or whether they're going to try and hold the territory and with a very uncertain outcome. So we're at a potentially quite important point in the war here. The real issue is how do Russians take this Ukrainian success, and does it undermine Putin's authority, or is it just simply viewed as part of the war and Putin's support remains unshaken? That we don't know either.
I will ask you about Putin's reaction to that, but before that, I would like to know your opinion about the position that Biden administration is taking right now. So it's just kind of a common knowledge, right, that Biden administration was against the war activities on the Russian territory. Has anything changed in your opinion, or you would agree that they have had no information about the plan of Zelensky and military command of Ukraine? Would you imagine that White House would not know?
Well, I think the Ukrainians have kept this kind of information from the United States and other NATO members for over a year ago, when the Ukrainians succeeded in pushing back Russian forces who were then in the northern part of Ukraine around Kharkiv and to the east of that, and basically took back the Ukrainian territory that Russian forces had seized earlier. That was without American pre-knowledge as well. I think the administration's attempt to limit Ukraine's military tactics, though, has been a mistake. I think when the war is being fought on your territory, it's obviously it would be a positive to take the war to the other side, and it was unrealistic to think the Ukrainians would stay restrained. So at this point, I think the administration is mostly hoping that the situation doesn't grow. The hostilities don't spread more widely, because part of what motivated Biden's approach, frankly, was a desire to keep the war in Ukraine off the front pages of America's newspapers before the election.
And what do you think, is it successful? Because right now, Ukraine is not the main topic. Right now, they don't comment on that. I don't see a lot of publications. So would you suggest?
Well, I think actually not among the presidential candidates, who aren't talking about substantive policy, either Trump or Harris, but in American media. Really, the war in Ukraine and the prospects for what may happen in the next days in the Middle East are really getting a lot of attention. So I think there is public attention to this surprising and successful Ukrainian move into Russia.
Yeah, I would like to ask you about the strategy of the United States. You said it's a mistake, this limitation, and another point of limitation is the American weapons that can be used on the Russian territory. Do you think that this limitation is over? That right now Ukrainians are actually using HIMARSs, for example. It's not proved by independent journalists. I'm not sure if it is really being used by Ukrainians, but still there are a lot of suggestions that American weapons are actually being used right now in Kursk region and other Russian regions. So do you think that there are no limits anymore, no red flags anymore?
Well, from the Biden administration's point of view, I think they still want to have the limits and the constraints. I do think there's a lot of support in Congress to take the limits off Ukraine. It's a fact now. We're about to come up on the third anniversary of this war. It's been going on for a long time, and it's something that's hurting both Russia and Ukraine, hurting Ukraine more than Russia. But part of, I think, NATO's failure is not giving Ukraine assistance in a strategic fashion. That's one reason that the war is gridlocked. And as many people can see, including particularly in Moscow, support for continuous aid to Ukraine is in trouble on Capitol Hill. So if you could find a way to provide the assistance in a more effective way, I think that would get a lot of support.
So, when it comes to Vladimir Putin, his position is right now, he has just said that after this attack against Russian regions, there can no be conversations with Ukrainian side. So, is he bluffing, in your opinion, or you see no negotiation prospects either?
Yeah, I don't think that at this point, as Russian troops are, if not in retreat, at least they've been pushed out of a chunk of Russian territory, Putin has any intention of negotiating. I think, and I've always worried that when Russian forces seem to be advancing, that would be the moment Putin might be open to negotiation if he thought it would freeze a new de facto border between Russia and Ukraine that was to Russia's advantage. But I don't see it as part of his playbook ever to agree to negotiation when he's in suffering tactical reverses on the battlefield.
So, you think that it's not going to be a big military success for Ukrainians?
I think it's hard for the Ukrainians to sustain the offensive they've already made. I think it was daring and certainly successful in its early days. The question is, if they face a Russian counteroffensive, can they hold the territory they've got now, or are they going to be driven back into Ukraine? And they're already hard pressed along other lines inside Ukraine, and at least some American military officials are worried that if they've diverted resources to this attack, they might be open to a surprise attack somewhere else in the Donbass, that where the Russian forces could make advances.
There are Russian civilians killed already in Kursk region, and others, thousands of people are trapped there. How does it affect the Ukrainian reputation on the world stage?
Honestly, I don't think they care. I think Ukrainian civilians have suffered substantial casualties, enormous destruction of property, loss of income, their houses. So this is payback, I think, from the perspective of Ukrainian public opinion, and this is what perhaps they're hoping will have some impact inside Russia to bring home to Russians what the Ukrainian civilians are going through, and therefore undercut support for the war in Russia itself.
And again, I'm so interested, Ambassador Bolton, about the very small reaction of the world on this. I mean, American officials, European officials, they're not saying anything. They're not evaluating this thing. They're saying, yes, Ukraine has a right to defend itself, but no more details, no more, I don't know, sentences about what's going on. Why do you think it's happening?
Well, I think they were all watching the Olympics. I mean, I think they were taken totally by surprise of this Ukrainian operation, and they're still trying to evaluate it, still trying to understand what the situation is on the ground inside Russia. And I think until they feel more confident they really know what's going on, I would expect they would maintain a pretty quiet posture. Now, that could change if there is a Russian counteroffensive about to happen. That would obviously change things pretty dramatically.
Okay, and who is definitely not watching Olympics all the time is Kamala Harris, and also, of course, Donald Trump, because they are involved in the very tough presidential campaigns. And what do you think about Democratic candidate, a new Democratic candidate? Is she a good president, potentially good president for Ukraine?
I don't think we can answer that question. She's had very little foreign policy experience during her career. even in her role as vice president, we don't know much about the position she took in internal administration debates. But the best prediction you can make is that she would pretty much follow what Biden has done in Ukraine and adhere to the same sorts of restraints and concerns that Biden has demonstrated. Trump, on the other hand, has said he would get Zelensky and Putin in a room together and solve the whole thing in 24 hours, which nobody believes can happen. But that's Trump reflecting his view that somehow he can forge a deal that nobody else has been able to find.
But can we be sure about the decisions of Donald Trump if elected as president?
No, I would worry from the Ukrainians' point of view that Trump considers himself a good friend of Vladimir Putin's, and that Putin would blame any failure to reach a settlement agreement on Zelensky and the Ukrainians, and that could work very much to Russia's advantage. That may be what Putin is thinking about right now.
So do you think that Donald Trump, when he was deciding about his vice presidential candidate, that his pick, he said years ago, but still, he said he doesn't care about Ukraine at all. And he's like anti-Ukrainian openly. So do you think that it's kind of a message from Trump's campaign? Or he was not thinking about the foreign policy when he was picking this guy?
No, I think Trump sees Vance as his successor, his heir apparent. I don't think Vance's views on Ukraine were that critical, but I don't think they're that different from Trump's. Honestly, that they don't understand why we're there, and they're irritated that NATO hasn't the other members of NATO haven't pulled their fair share of the load, and that's part of the mindset. Vance's selection was significantly unpopular among a lot of Republicans who do favor support for Ukraine. So it would still be, I think, a struggle with Congress and inside a Trump administration if he did win in November. And I think Trump drives this train anyway. He thinks he can make the deal. He doesn't need anybody else's help. He'll just get Zelensky and Putin together, and he'll figure out a way to solve it. That's how Trump thinks.
He really
Wrongly.
thinks so.
That's
like he is honestly sure about his ability to put Putin and Zelensky at the table.
Well, what he's sure about is that he would get them at the table. I don't think he's so sure he would get a deal, but it doesn't matter to him. He would just blame the failure to get a deal on one or the other of them. And that's why I'm worried that his affinity for Putin would be bad news for Zelensky and Ukraine.
And I'm going to the finishing the interview. As I see it, considering our conversation, there are no good options for Ukraine. Like it would be Harris or Trump. It's not going to be a big change for Zelensky. Maybe that's why he's acting like that, making decisions by his own, thinking about the prospects. What do you think?
I think it would be advantageous for his position militarily and politically before the U.S. election. That way, if he is in effect forced to the negotiating table, he will be bargaining from the best position of strength he can come up with. So that's why this incursion into Russia appears to be a plus at the moment. But the Ukrainian decision makers now have to decide whether they try and maintain the position or whether they come back across the border. Because if they were defeated decisively in Russia as a result of this, they could turn what, as of now, looks like a success into a failure, which they obviously wouldn't want to do.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Bolton. Good to see you on TV Rain.
Glad to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.